Hello, I'm Cheryl Espinosa Jones, and I want to welcome you to Good Grief, where we talk each week about the transformations that can come from loss. Today I'm welcoming Larry Carlat. He's a grief coach and group leader for bereaved parents at Our House Grief Support Center in Los Angeles. He's written for the New York Times Magazine, Esquire, GQ, Rolling Stone, Men's Journal, Men's Health, Psychology Today, and AARP. His new book, A Space in the Heart, A Survival Guide for Grieving Parents, was recently published by Rowman Littlefield. Welcome, Larry.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you and glad for the book. You know, this idea, which is so intrinsic to my show, which is that sometimes our grief catapults us into a whole new uh, calling, living, um, and sometimes beautiful. Thank you for that. It's a beautiful book to help people a great deal, and I'll bet you've already gotten that feedback.
I have. I've gotten very, very positive feedback. I like to make the joke that I've gotten 100% on the Larry Rotten Tomatoes meter. Uh, what's most meaningful to me is when I hear from a bereaved parent who have read the book and they say they see themselves in the book, they see their child in the book, and they deeply feel the emotions of the book. And that's what I was trying to do. And, for the most part, I think that part is successful. And I also think that's what sort of differentiates my book from other grief books.
Well, the other thing is I got to know your son. And I always appreciate that when I'm talking with a griever to know their person. So maybe you can bring the listeners in a little bit to your life with him, and the loss of him, and kind of the Rob story in a.
Yeah. All right. Let's start from the end, unfortunately. So Rob took his own life about 6 years ago. He was 28 years old. He suffered from bipolar disorder, depression. He was an alcoholic. He also had conflicted feelings about being adopted. I did not share the conflict, but we did have some conflicted feelings about it. And as I've said in sort of pithy way, but it's true, Rob was a pain in the ass who was deeply loved by many. He wreaked a lot of havoc. We had a very difficult time from the time we got him, which was the day he was born. He was a difficult baby, a difficult child, a difficult teenager.
Kind of cracked open the code on that kind of love, that kind of, extreme ride or die love with.
Yeah, and I think the reason for that is that my father and I did not get along. And I always felt like I learned how not to be a dad from him, and I was going to be the opposite of him. And I also carried a lot of anger for my father. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is, uh, and I don't know if we want to go here just yet, but okay, I was just going to say, so I've been to psychic mediums, and in one of the readings, the psychic medium told me that my father was there on the other side to help Rob transition. And
Mm.
when I heard those words, I still get a shiver down my spine saying this. When I heard those words, I just started to cry. And I forgave my father for all the transgressions. And I really felt love for him for the first time because he was there for my son. And I get emotional just talking about that.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, and this is an aside, but I interviewed the medium you went to. I
Oh, you
interviewed
did.
4 years ago. Yes.
She's the real deal, isn't
It's
she?
the real deal for sure. There's no way to do a show on grief, in my opinion, without having at least a few conversations with mediums, because so many people go to mediums in grief when they never would have considered it before, which I think we can say applies to you, that
Totally.
you'll try anything, yes?
It's exactly right. And I hear it so I do, grief support groups for bereaved parents. And it comes up all the time about should they go or should they not go or that they went. And I always say you
You up a
should
bit,
go.
Larry. You
Uh,
broke up a bit, but you said
no, I see you breaking up as well. Uh, what I was going to say was I always tell people that why wouldn't you be open to try something that might give you some sort of comfort? Uh, like, what's the downside? This is so, and I was a very skeptical person about all of this, and I'm not a skeptic anymore. I'm not a skeptic about anything. I'm very, very much, when you talk, just to go back to being, cracked open, that turns out to be a good thing. I've been open to everything that could possibly help me heal, including doing psychedelic journeys and going to multiple psychic mediums. Why? Because it makes me feel good and it provides incredible comfort. And what I say to other bereaved parents is like, why would you deny that for yourself?
I liked the way you spoke about all that in the sense that something I say a lot is I don't really care what's true about the afterlife. I care about maintaining connection.
That's
A-
perfect.
And so, is my wife, my first wife, out there, actually conversing with me? I really don't care.
I said the same exact words. I said the same exact words because,
Opinions, but I don't know if I'm right, and it doesn't matter.
yeah, I don't know if I'm right either, but it feels really good. It feels great to be connected. I feel I'm more and better connected with Rob today than I was when he was here, because when he was here, he was a handful. And I choose not to go back and relitigate all the things and all the havoc that Rob reaped. I choose to see all the good in him and his essence. And that's who I talk to every day. I talk to him every day, and I'm talking to all the good that was in him. And it feels so good to be connected like that. So I like to say I have a better relationship with him now than I ever have before.
Not an unusual experience as long as you don't cut off the relationship. That's hard to come by if you're trying to get rid of the connectedness the whole time, isn't it?
Well, it's the same thing about pain, isn't it? Where I think a lot of people hang on to that pain because they think that if they're feeling the pain, they're still connected to the child. And they don't make the choice. A lot of people do, but some people don't make the choice. And choice is the key word here for for the way you can continue to love and stay connected to your child, and you don't have to feel the pain. But it's a choice.
And I'm sure I know for myself, there are poignant moments that one could call painful, still like 28 or 9 years later.
Hmm.
I don't mind those either. They just come in and
Hmm.
they go out, you know.
Exactly.
It's all
Exactly.
part of one big picture. So you talk about uh, this is a little bit of an unusual thing, I think, because I've read a lot of books about child loss, as you can
Hmm.
imagine.
Sure.
The section in your book where you're talking about being an extraordinary parent, I think that's helpful because in fact, it's so painful to think about that we don't have words for it. You know, most people avoid like the plague, imagining
Hmm.
themselves into a situation where their child dies. So I think that part of the book would really be helpful to people. Would you share that? We are extraordinary parents.
I would love to. I've always found it strange that there's no word for a parent who loses a child. Why do widows, widowers, and orphans get to have all the fun? I think it's time for someone to right this wrong. Bear with me for a moment as I reaffirm what you already know. Children aren't supposed to die before their parents. That's just not the way life should work. We give birth to children or adopt them. We love and nurture them. We raise them. They grow up. We grow old, and then we die. The circle of life, sunrise, sunset, rinse and repeat. Choose your own metaphor. That's what every parent expects. And by and large, it's also the way things play out. Losing a child, no matter the circumstances, goes against the natural order of things. It's not part of the ordinary experience. It is something entirely different, and we become something entirely different. When your child is taken from you, you are no longer ordinary parents. Ordinary parents don't visit their child in a cemetery. Ordinary parents don't cry themselves to sleep at night. Ordinary parents don't wake up each morning knowing they'll never see their child again. We become extraordinary. We become the ones who are unlike the others. We become the newest members of the world's cruelest club, one that is already overcrowded and where the cost to join is the steepest price imaginable. We become those people, the tragic ones who are whispered about and pitied. We become the ones who are shattered seemingly beyond repair. Remember Mary Tyler Moore and Ordinary People? That. But after a while, something strange takes place that's right out of a Marvel comic book. A metamorphosis occurs during our grief and mourning, transforming us from extraordinary to extraordinary. A lot happens when you close up the space between those two words. We are extraordinary parents, not in the sense that we are exceptionally good, which is what people usually mean when they use that adjective. But look it up and you'll find we are the very definition of the word. A, going beyond what is usual, regular, or customary. B, exceptional to a very marked extent. We are extraordinary parents who must go on living in the world with a hole in our heart. We are extraordinary parents who, in many cases, still love and care for our other children. We are extraordinary parents who go to work every day and function as human beings, while most people are unaware of our secret identities. We are extraordinary parents who feel things that no ordinary parent has ever felt, and we can endure the deepest pain because that has become one of our superpowers. And that's another notable thing about us. We all have different superpowers because each of us experiences our loss in our own particular way. Some of us have an unlimited capacity for compassion and forgiveness. Some of us become impervious to pain. Some of us are masters of disguise. Some of us can turn to stone. Some of us can become invisible. And then there are those of us who can open up and share it with the world. We walk among you. We are your friends and neighbors, your co-workers, the quiet couple who sat at the table next to you in a restaurant last night. We are the extraordinary parents, and we don't mind if you want to call us by our first name.
I love that. When I first became a parent, my oldest child is 44. So it was a long time ago. And one of my dear teachers recommended to a whole group of us to, if we had children, to go home and imagine their death and to keep going day by day by day until we could say to ourselves, and this is before I'd ever had gigantic grief in my life, keep going till we reached a day where we could say, it will always be there and I can go on. And what you're talking about in part is the aversion to imagining things. But I remember being so fearful when my first child was born that she would die. I was working hard to avoid that. What cleared that up was actually imagining it. So if you lose a child, you have no choice, do you?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because people go and they say things like, you're so brave or you're so strong or you're a warrior. And all of us have the same answer. It's like, we're none of those things. However, we need to wake up in the morning and we still need to take care of our other children and we need to go to work and we have no choice. But we are not brave and courageous, even though we are.
Right. That's the paradox there, isn't it?
It is, and that's the whole transformation that happens. I mean, I'd love to talk a little about that. I know we have a break coming up, uh, but the
Yeah,
tr
well, but that's the whole idea of this space that I created is that yes, there's the painful process of grief, but most people who are willing to touch their grief do transform in one way or another. It's part of the human potential, I feel.
Absolutely,
You're a good example.
yeah, no, it's one of the most incredible things I witness in grief groups, and it's the reason why I do grief groups, because to watch people slowly come back to life and transform, and I think transform into better people and better parents than they ever were before. I mean, it gives me chills just talking about it because it's a phenomenal thing to witness, and it's a phenomenal thing, and just beautiful to be a little tiny part of that.
It's interesting because we do have models for that, the hero's journey, uh, quote unquote extraordinary things that people do with their calamities. It's in the culture, but nobody thinks it's going to be them.
And
We
that's the
have an
thing.
expectation that if we get clobbered over the head, that might be us.
That's what I say to people. It's like, especially people who I think have become extraordinary parents. I go, You're the last to know. Everyone can see this about you, and you're always the last one to know because we don't walk around thinking we're heroes, but we are heroes.
Ordinary heroes in that way, right?
Absolutely.
It's part of our humanness to figure out how to make sense of it in a way.
Hmm.
So let's talk about those transformations in you when we come back, because you're a great example. Many things are different in you because of that experience. Listeners,
Absolutely.
you'll find links to my website and social media on my website, goodgriefwithcheryl.com. And to find Larry Carlat, you can look for his book, um, which is so sorry, A Space in the Heart, either Audible, Amazon. And he also does a website called griefforguys.com. We'll be back soon. Welcome back to Good Grief. It's your host, Cheryl Espinosa Jones, and I've been talking with Larry Carlat about his book, A Space in the Heart. And before the break, Larry, we were touching on, we were beginning our conversation about transformation. Of course, that's a big part of this space. And I was, some people transform. I feel I transformed a lot during my wife's illness.
Hmm.
I was already a different person, before I got to grief over her, just because it was such a long illness. You, however, got, hit by the train, as
Hmm.
it were. And then, as we mentioned before, set about to see what could help, um, which, you know, does favor transformation if you're looking for ways to move forward and not judging those things, just saying, I'll try anything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, can you talk about that some, your own?
Yeah. I'm trying to think where I should start. I guess we can go back to me being cracked open and really being open to sort of anything. Uh, but I've also become like my friends goof on me and they call me Larry Woo Woo now because I came here 12 years ago and I was like quintessential New York cynic and agnostic, wise guy, all of the above. And I really did not believe in anything like the afterlife or anything. I used to say, how come I've never had a transformative experience? And I would say that to Janie, my girlfriend, soon to be my wife. She's a Buddhist. So, uh, I go, when is it my time? I think the biggest single thing I can point to is actually doing psychedelic journeys. I mean, that really, I've had a number of transformative, profound experience where, and I always caution people before I tell any of these stories, like, I sort of hit the magic mushroom jackpot, and that's not the way it works for everyone. But I had one of a number of trips where I had I saw Rob's spirit and I knew it was him. And it was one of the most magnificent things I've ever seen in my life. And I remember just talking to him and really just weeping and just saying, "You're so beautiful. You're so beautiful." In the
Mhm.
same trip, I also saw my father's spirit. I saw my mother's spirit. I saw my own spirit, which was this reminder of who I really am, which was also just a mind-blowing thing. I had an ego dissolution experience where I quote unquote died. And and I realize as I say those words how crazy it sounds. And yet
Not to me. I'm
no, I'm
heard
talking
it all.
to people who have never done anything like this. I sound like I'm a little crazy. But anyway, it was just an incredible experience. I've had subsequent experiences. That one was an all-time, and it changed me. It just changed the way I live in the world. I've also become sort of well, two things. One, I've become a little bit of a Pied Piper for this, for bereaved parents, especially after it's been a year or 2 years. I really think that they can benefit no matter what their experience is. I think if you've had any sort of trauma, it helps you heal. And the other transformation is just being a group leader and a grief coach, because again, it was not on my roadmap. I was not a servicey type of guy at all.
Well, and who says when I grow up I want to be a grief counselor? I did it.
Exactly. Of course, of course. And it turns out it's the most wonderful thing I've ever done. It's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. Uh, People don't know that we get more out of it than they do just by watching them and helping them heal. It's just an incredible, incredible feeling. I have a group tonight. I can't wait to go see them. And none of this was on my roadmap. I like to say I wasn't a servicey type of guy because I was always in service to my son. It was he, I like to say he was an eclipse of a son. Um,
Mm.
and I felt good about doing it. And yet finally I couldn't save him because he didn't want to be saved.
Yes. Well, that kind of you may or may not know, probably you do, since you're interested in psychedelic journeys, that there's a lot of work going on about psychedelic journeys as a way to um, treat death anxiety.
That's why I went. I went
Well,
initially.
people who are dying themselves, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
the way I think about it, having not done it in a guided way, is that it puts people in touch. I have had clients who have, it puts people in touch with um the bigger, what's beyond. Um, one of my teachers would say, the only spiritual injury to the spiritual body is the illusion of separation.
hmm
So what you're describing sounds like that you were part of something large where death and life and all of those things are just less relevant.
100%. I'll just quickly tell you just that part of the story where I was sort of laying under this beautiful sycamore tree and I was looking at a Buddha, and then all of a sudden I looked around and I saw the world as puzzle pieces, and they were puzzle pieces that were disengaging from each other, and and then all of a sudden I was in this very buzzy white space, and I don't know how long I was there, but I remember coming out of it and turning to my guide and saying, "I just died." I don't know if we can curse here. I won't. But
And
I just died, and it was wonderful. It was amazing. Uh, and so that was just my little experience with ego dissolution.
uh-huh. Let's have you read a little more of the book. Life rolls on. I think
All right.
that's a good contrast, right? Because you have an experience like that. I think my first wife's death was such an experience.
Mm,
It was transformative and euphoric.
yeah.
Wasn't grief hurts, but that was later. Her death,
Yeah.
incredible, actually. Um, and then you have to, wake up and deal with your crappy child or, do whatever the next day. So life rolls on, doesn't it?
Yeah. It sure does. If I can tee it up for a second, I'll talk about it. The reason I want to tee this up, it's the last chapter in the book. And the book is in three parts. And part one is called The End. And it's the end of your life as you knew it. It's the end of your child's life. Part two is called The Middle. And that's sort of the grief journey. And it's the longest part and it's the hardest part. And part three is the beginning, and it's the beginning of your life as an extraordinary parent and integrating your grief. So this is the last chapter in the
Oh,
book.
you know what? I just realized I actually had originally wanted you to read Love Isn't Enough to Save the Person uh,
Okay.
segment. You can do either one you want because we're at
You
one.
choose. I have them both in front of me. I'm happy to
Let's go ahead and go with where we are.
let's go with Life Rolls On, and then we can read the other one, which would be fine. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You made it. I'm so glad to see you here. I wish I could give you a great big hug. Pour yourself a drink, put your feet up, and enjoy the moment. No one deserves it more than you. You've been through a lot and have come a long way. As time goes by, the early days of your grief have become fuzzy. You remember the pain, but you don't really remember. It's sort of like how some women forget the intensity of childbirth, or so I've been told. They forget the physical pain, but not the memory of it. That's why it's important to take a look at how you and your grief have changed. It's truly amazing, almost magical when you look back on it. You've progressed from feeling completely hopeless and in the worst pain you've ever felt in your life to cherishing each day you have left. How the hell did that happen? You know how, but even that begins to fade. All the hard work you've put in, all the tears you've shed, all the dark nights of the soul you've wrestled with get packed away in your head and heart because the worst is over and life rolls on. Whenever I think of those three little words, I think of Rob. I see those words tattooed in cursive on his left forearm. When he was here with us, I thought those words were emblematic of his no fucks given attitude. But now I think they're a message to me and a message to you. The message is something we all know and have always known. And I don't think I need to spell it out for you because I think we all feel it deep down inside. We live our lives differently than we have in the past, and differently than others who have never experienced anything like the depth of our loss. For us, life rolls on has become a way of life. We need to do things that feel important to us and to others. We are present, we are we are more present, slowing life's roll and amplifying each moment. We appreciate every day we have left on earth and the day ahead whenever it comes, when we meet our child again. We still curse out idiot drivers who cut us off on the freeway. We talk too loud and too much on our phones like everybody else, and we often forget to replace the toilet paper roll. We're not perfect. We fuck up like everyone else. We're extraordinary, but we're also human, which again is absolutely remarkable given the trauma and drama we've endured. We're still standing and doing our best, and that's what our kids would want us to do. I know this and you know this because that's what they tell us every day. They remind us to be happy. They remind us to be kind. They remind us to be grateful. They remind us to be honest. They remind us how much love we have in our hearts and how we should spread it around far and wide, but also leave a little left over for ourselves. And that's what I'm going to remind you about right now. Do me a favor and close your eyes. Picture your child's smiling face. Stay with it a moment. Breathe it in, savor it. Have you ever seen a more beautiful face? Now I want you to remember the day they were born and the first time you set eyes on them and how it was love at first sight. Remember their gorgeous tiny face and remember how incredible you felt on that wonderful day. Breathe that in as much as you can. Now fast forward to another happy time in their life. Maybe it was a birthday or a trip to Disneyland or a day at the beach. Picture how happy they look blowing out the candles or frolicking in the waves or whatever they're doing in the joyful moment you've chosen. Now place your hand over your heart and feel them smiling and saying, "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad." Have you ever seen a happier face? Okay, now take a deep breath and imagine their face today. They look all grown up with a beatific grown up smile. But if you look closely, you can still see the baby that lives inside them. Now tell them how much you miss them. Say the words out loud and tell them how much you love them and will always love them. Say it over and over again until you can hear them saying it back to you. Smother them with kisses and hug them tight. Feel their heart beating next to yours. Feel their tears running down your cheek. Now, as gently as you can, let them go and whisper, "Goodbye." Open your eyes.
I was thinking while you were reading that, um, in a way, your grief intersects two of the things people fear the most, both the loss of a child and suicide loss.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it seems to me, but you tell me, it seems to me that you didn't that you pretty quickly accepted that you couldn't have saved him.
Okay.
And I know that that's a very, very hard turn to take for lots of people, especially people who've lost a child through suicide, because we make ourselves responsible,
Of
for
course,
keeping them
yeah.
alive. How did you navigate that? Was it just that you saw how much he struggled, or were there particular things that helped you to come to terms with that relatively quickly? I'm not saying you never had a moment of, regret or
Hmm, hmm.
self-determination, but what
Yeah,
do you?
I struggled with it for, I would say, almost a year. Um, and I finally came to a place where the two words that rang in my head was mental illness, that Rob had a mental illness, and we never were able to wrap our arms around it, and he never really acknowledged it. And I just felt those two words were sort of the skeleton key that unlocked uh, all of the guilt and all of the whys and all of the, self-inflicted wounds. And I just, I let myself off the hook. I felt, and the next thing I'll read sort of addresses this, but I felt I did everything in my power to keep him here. And, the mental illness took over and got what it wanted. And I felt my ex-wife, myself, we did everything we could, and Rob didn't want to be here anymore. And like you said, he was in pain. He couldn't be here. And I sort of get it. His struggle is over. He's at peace. And that's the way I view him. Like he's all good right now because he's not struggling with his demons. And I was able to, I also think, sort of how I did it. I'm a writer, so I write. I wrote about him every day for a year. Every day I wrote something, and it was a way to stay connected to him. It was a way for me to ventilate. It was a way for me to process. Uh, but I also felt, and I'll say this right now too, I felt he was right by my side. I felt when I was writing the book, he was helping me write the book. When I give talks or do readings, I always say, you can't see him, but Rob's right here beside me. He's here. He's listening to this podcast right now. So, and I do think I am sort of the exception. I know I can say just because I was in a grief group, and I do feel that I got to this peaceful place faster than anyone else in the group, for sure.
And we can imagine that a lot of different ways, right? But one way to imagine it is you really, really engaged with him. You tried all the different things, right?
I
You tried
did.
pulling him in. You tried tough love. You tried um, letting him handle everything and meeting him for lunch. You tried everything. And then to maybe that makes it slightly easier to say, I couldn't have prevented this. But I do think it's a helpful thing for other people to hear that um, it wasn't just that he was adopted. I have an adopted child who's not suicidal, right?
Hmm, hmm.
It wasn't just that he had bipolar. Not every bipolar takes their life. It was some kind of amalgam we can't understand that makes one person go forward and another person not.
Hmm. No, beautifully said. I agree 100%. I would also say that fully immersed myself in my grief. I felt by writing every day, by looking at photos, by watching videos. And I think, there were two ways, not that it's binary, we know it's not binary, but I do think, in general, there's fully immersed in it, and then there's a lot of denial. And I did not deny anything for a second. I went for the pain, and I intuitively sort of went towards it, not knowing that that was sort of the fastest route. It was certainly painful, but I faced it, and I write about that, where at some point you have to face what scares you the most and feel that terrible, terrible pain, because it's a way that you'll move forward. And a lot of people are still scared of that pain.
I could not agree with you more about that because, of course, I'm a grief counselor, usually dealing with one person, and people have so much judgment about their pain. That's another way people stay away from it, and it
Hmm.
gets you nowhere. Your pain is your pain. So
Yep,
I entirely endorse what you're saying, that actually diving in and doing each moment one at a time is does lead to less, because in a way, blaming ourselves is a way to avoid
totally.
the out of control feeling.
Hmm. But I
Uh,
do think we do have control of that by making decisions. And, in the beginning, you don't even know that's on the table for you.
no, you're just the decision is to respond to what you what you're going through, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Listeners, you can go to my website. That's goodgriefwithcheryl.com. There are links to all my social media, etc. there, and my email list. And to find Larry Carlat, go to griefforguys.com or look up his book on Amazon or Audible. And we'll be back soon. Welcome back. This is your host, Cheryl Espinosa Jones, and I've been talking with Larry Carlat about his recently released book, A Space in the Heart, and his son, Rob, and his process of grief and transformation, the subject of this show, if you want to sum it up. And I feel before the break, you said something that maybe is the most vital thing for grievers, which is to accept grief. It sounds so, sort of comically simple,
Hmm.
but grief has its own way, doesn't it? And it's different. I can't tell anyone how to grieve. I can
Hmm.
just say yes to it. You'll one foot in front of the other will get you there, right?
100%.
So when you encounter people that are, um, I guess we'll say grief averse,
Hmm.
who don't
Hmm.
want to open their hearts to their pain. That's how I might put it.
Yeah.
Um, have you cultivated ways? I know I have ways in my work. Honestly, 90% of it is saying you're normal.
You took the words right out of my mouth because that's where I begin. I was coaching someone this morning, and the first move always is to normalize whatever they're feeling. And I tell them, you know what, if you're angry today, okay, good. If you're sad, fine. It's all normal. And you can have all of these feelings all at the same time, and it's overwhelming and confusing, but guess what? It's normal. Don't worry about it. And some people can sort of hear it, and some people at some point that clicks in, but I just feel step one, the normalization of whatever you're feeling. And then you go, I see.
Well, and also then that to me leads to what we've been talking about previously, trying things you've never tried before. Just because they call out and say me, right?
Yeah. And I'm generally, I like to say I'm a very gentle guide where I am. Usually people come to me because they are stuck on something in particular. It's not like we have a years relationship the way I may have been in therapy for many, many times. It's usually there's one basic problem to be solved. But more than anything, I sort of, because I've been there with these folks, uh, we're connected to each other, and I'm gently guiding them towards what they're stuck on. And then we'll revisit that, and we'll revisit it a number of times. And I'm sort of a little bit of a like a football coach, and I'm trying to sort of, you know, get them to this place of quote unquote acceptance. And at the same time, just sort of cheering them on and telling them that they're dealing with this the best they can and they should really acknowledge that. And I always also tell them that as time goes by, grief becomes easier. It's not easy, it's never easy, but it does abate. And I think it abates faster if you put in the work. And obviously, if someone is coming, to you or to me, they're willing to do some work.
Correct. But also, you mentioned having done therapy uh,
Hmm.
before losing Rob, before Rob's death. Me too. Um, I was surprised to learn, though, during my wife's illness, I still wasn't entirely comfortable with my internal territory.
Hmm.
And it was more like, how do I, quell the beast? It wasn't so much, how do I sit down with the beast?
Yeah.
Grief did that for me.
Hmm.
There's no experience inside of myself I'm afraid of.
Me too.
Right. So that is a possible benefit because then I feel more open-hearted about joy and all kinds of other things as well.
Oh, I totally agree with you. And I think it's so interesting because in the beginning, you're so scared of the pain that is the grief beast. And then by the end, that grief becomes a part of you. And it becomes, I think, the best part of you.
I agree completely. I'm not going to have you read, I'm going to refer people to the book to find Love Isn't Enough to Save the Person You Love because it's a bit long and we're running out of time.
Let's
But
do the short one.
yeah, let's I feel that your other the other reading you sent me is perfect, going towards the end.
Yes.
Um, a little reminder. And I hope that'll tweak people to go read that part of the book because it's especially important, right? The idea that we can't save the people we love. That goes for, you know, my wife with cancer, we really can't save anybody. We can be there to support them if they're able to save themselves. It's quite a different mindset, I think. So I'm directing people to the book for that. But could you read that
Great.
little reminder?
Yes, it's called A Little Reminder. Here's a little reminder of an important thing that often gets lost in the grief sauce. It's simply this: there is always hope. It's hard to see sometimes. The sadness blinds us, but hope is always right there with you. All you have to do is reach out for it. Whenever you're having a really bad day, wrap your arms around it and don't let go. And it doesn't hurt to also hold on to it on the not so bad days as well. Let hope guide you. Hope is the light in the darkness. Whatever you're feeling right now will pass. Things will get better, and then they'll get worse, and then they'll get better again. You know the drill. You've been on the exhausting grief ride for what feels like forever, but it's not forever. And as long as you have hope in your heart, everything is going to be okay because hope is everything. Hope makes you look forward to the next day. Hope heals your heart. As Rob would say, hope is dope.
I love that. And also, we could, if we had another hour, we could talk about how we define hope. Uh, Hope for what? It changes, right?
It sure
Um,
does.
but to me, it has something to do with what you're talking about, which is that the next moment comes one way or
Mhm.
another, that nothing's permanent. You know, we're a moving um, alchemical process as humans, aren't we?
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed having you. Thanks for coming on the show today,
My pleasure.
and good luck with the book.
Thank you very
You can
much.
find Larry Carlat by looking up his book, A Space in the Heart, at Amazon or Audible. He does a cool website called griefforguys.com. Um, Go to him for coaching or groups if you're in the LA area. Next week, I'll have Kim Canton to talk about her book, Where Yellow Flowers Bloom. This has been Good Grief with Cheryl Espinosa Jones. I look forward to being with you again next week for another